Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your hosts of That Startup Show, Ray Johnston and Benjamin Law.
Hello and welcome to That Startup Show. I'm Ray Johnston, and please, some pity applause for my co-host Benjamin Law.
Needs to be sadder. What is the future for democracy? What is the present for democracy? Is Australia actually a functional democracy, or is the Prime Minister decided by whoever faceless government backbenchers hate the least this week?
You know, we were doing fine for 80,000 years, just putting it out there. So is direct democracy the future? Are we all going to be voting on every decision just with an app? Or will that lead to an entire world of Bodie McVote faces?
In fact, there has been a poll, and the new name for direct democracy is Bodie McVote face.
Can we trust the results of this poll? Has it been hacked by Russians, or is it just plain fake news?
Sounds like somebody's being a Haiti McHate face.
You need to stop that now. Well, by the end of the show, we might have a better way forward. As we look at the world of civic tech, we're talking government, social enterprises, and service deliveries.
And Uber.
Ah, yes. Everyone's always looking for the next Uber, which is why my new app is going to tell you how long it is until the next Uber is built. There's one being launched in 3 minutes.
It really is the Uber of Ubers.
That's how I pitched it. Yeah, all the VCs literally exploded.
But technology does have the power to reach out, break down boundaries, and include more people in society and decision-making.
By that, I assume you mean the Russian troll farms that until recently had been cruelly shut out of the US electoral process.
Exactly. By the way, am I the only one who thinks a Russian troll farm sounds kind of cute? I picture them a bit like Wombies. Like, trust me, if this was the early 90s, the Children's TV Foundation would have been all over that. Trolls.
It would have been the sweetest subversion of the will of the people since Papa Smurf seized control of Smurfland.
Yes, and Ray, our show is a direct democracy. I mean, a Bodie McVote face. So if you want to have your voice heard, tweet us at TSU Show or use the hashtag #ThatStartupShow. Remember, we work in the media, so we have no original ideas or moral compass. We are putty in your hands.
This is why we're launching our own party, That Startup Party. We're going to be different from all the other parties, though.
That's right. Under my leadership, we won't all be about navel-gazing and leadership spills. We'll be focused on the needs of you, the people.
What do you mean, your leadership?
Come on, Ray, I don't think this country is ready for yet another female PM.
Well, there's only one way to solve this. Across to our correspondent on the floor, DinushiDais. She's doing some old school face-to-face democracy. You know, kissing babies, shaking hands, knifing leaders. Who's down there?
Thank you, Ray and Ben. It is great to be here with this wonderful crowd. But what's not so great is we are a little sick and tired. We are sick and tired of having the balance of power held by quite literally a spaghetti can who got a measly 8 votes in rural Queensland. Now, if any old nutbag is going to be holding the balance of power and holding our democracy ransom, it should be us, and that's why we've created That Startup Party, and we've even got t-shirts to go with it. And like any great political party, we need a leadership crisis. So tonight, the fight is on between Wonder Ray and Super Ben. So we're going to have a couple of brave volunteers from the audience come and spruik for their favorite candidate, and they'll also be voting for their favorite candidate in our Twitter poll, which you'll find at TSU Show. So at the end of the episode, we'll find out the results, and we have our very own Civic resident tech expert to verify the results for us. Thank you, Eyal, for being here with us.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. So now I've got a question about poll results. Are they the true test of a great leader?
Well, no. Actually, polls are reactive. In fact, the way our governments engage with citizens is backwards. They decide what they're going to do, they announce it, and then they defend what's happening, when in fact we have all the tools out there to crowdsource ideas, analyze them, and actually come up with solutions before we actually get to polls.
Well, that is something to think about as we get started with our campaigning. Back to you, Ray and Ben.
Thank you, Dinushi and Eyal. So this show is all about making society better, greasing the wheels of government, and not in a systemic kickbacks way.
Although, who knows? Someone could be pitching a micropayment app for bribing your local member in real time.
Ray, I can tell you no one is pitching that, because that app would have already been funded 1,000 times over by lobbyists from New South Wales.
That is correct. But before I rush off to launch that idea, it's time to meet our incredible guests who will be judging our pitches.
Our first guest is the Australian bureau chief for the New York Times, having previously been posted in Mexico City and Baghdad. So please tell him how bad your commute was this morning. He's been a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for International Reporting and has covered military recruiting, New York City government and New Jersey politics. And now he's covering Australia. God help him. Please welcome the legendary Damien Cave.
Hello. Our second guest won a host of awards over the course of her journalism career. She was Journalist of the Year at the Multicultural and Indigenous Media Awards in 2015. She was Community Broadcaster of the Year at Deadly Awards in 2012 and has received a commendation for excellence in journalism from the World Indigenous Television Broadcasters Network. She's currently the host of NITV News. Please welcome the very deadly Natalie Ahmat.
So, panel, we saw the role that social media played in enabling the Arab Spring, and we've since seen it deployed in a host of other political directions, from trolling to #MeToo. Do you feel that technology is necessarily making democracy stronger, Damien?
Well, I think it's probably making democracy both stronger and weaker. It's got the ability to connect people that wouldn't otherwise be connected, to mobilize things that are good or bad, but to some degree all it does is amplify who we are, right?
Okay.
So I kind of feel like it's just a megaphone for our best and worst tendencies.
For what's already there.
Deep inside us.
What about you, Natalie? What's your take?
Well, I think, especially working in the area of Indigenous affairs, as I do, we really have seen Indigenous people who in this country haven't had a voice. Technology and social media has very much given people a platform.
It's democratised access.
Absolutely, and we are seeing it being used also for online activism, where once upon a time, for 80 years, we've had a really strong, proud history of protest in Aboriginal Australia, but now we're seeing that move online as well. Not to say we don't like a good hit the streets protest as well, but we're sort of seeing a lot of movements within Indigenous Australia where they're using social media to get the message out there, and the Change the Date is a perfect example.
So we're seeing gatekeepers being knocked down for better or for worse.
Right.
All right, so we're going to kick off with a game that we would like to play. It's called Rankety Rank.
It's pretty rank.
So you'll get 3 options to rank in order from highest to lowest. But first we need to test our buzzers.
Yes, that's working fine, Natalie.
Hello. Excellent.
Okay, so jump in. It is multiple choice. There are no wrong answers. Well, they actually are wrong
There
answers.
are wrong answers.
But first, who has the most followers on Twitter? Jump in. Donald Trump, Lady Gaga, or Mark Zuckerberg?
I'm going to have to say Donald Trump.
That's not actually right. The answer is Lady Gaga, who's my personal president, and then Trump, and then the Zuck. Mark Zuckerberg has 447,000 followers despite having only tweeted 19 times, and 18 of them were, "How dumb is tweeting? I just don't get it."
Oh, gosh. All right, so next up, who has the highest score on the Index of Economic Freedom according to the Heritage Foundation and the Wall Street Journal? Is it Australia, Singapore, or Finland?
I'm just going to take a guess. Finland?
Ooh, You would think so, but
Other way
it's
round.
Singapore, then Australia, then Finland.
You were
That's
so
what I meant.
incorrect.
Yeah.
I was doing it in reverse.
Ranking the other way around.
Yeah.
Singapore is actually second in the rankings overall. Australia comes in 5th, and Finland is 26th. And Finland gave us the game Angry Birds, so I suppose the birds were angry because they were anarcho-capitalists
Or socialist
something?
utopians.
Yeah.
Now, next round. According to Reporters Without Borders, which country has the highest score on the Press Freedom Index? Highest score. Is it Burkina Faso, Ghana, or the United States?
I don't believe it's the United States, I would say, but I'm going to go with Ghana.
The correct answer is Ghana. Big round of applause for both Damien and Ghana. It's Ghana first, then Burkina Faso, and then it's the good old US of A. Although, in defense of the US, you are free to report any good news on Donald Trump that you find, like when he, there was the time... No, I got nothing.
It's okay. It's okay. Look, our prime ministers are usually in power for long enough for your 2-minute noodles to soften. But which of these leaders has been in power the longest? Is it Vladimir Putin from Russia, Angela Merkel from Germany, and Paul Biya from Cameroon?
I'm going to go with Cameroon just because...
Cameroon!
You are
I've never heard of him,
correct.
so
Yes.
clearly haven't been ousted anytime
Yes.
recently.
I don't know why that required a wiggle, but it did. You got it right, Nat. So the correct order is Cameroon's Biya at 43 years, then Russia's Putin at 19 years, that's both as PM and as president, and then Germany's Merkel at 12 years. Paul Biya is now 85 years old, but the only leadership spills he has to worry about are those little things of custard getting on his cardigan.
God bless dictatorships. Now, according to Crunchbase, which civic tech company has raised the most amount of money? Change.org, My Society, or a startup called Aunt Bertha?
I'm going to go
Natalie.
with Aunt Bertha just because of the
Yeah,
name.
I know, it's a great name, right? I've never heard of them, but I love the name. The correct order is Change.org at $72 million, Aunt Bertha at $10 million, My Society at $575,000, and Aunt Bertha is probably my favourite name for a startup as well. I just love a company that sounds like it would force feed you coleslaw at a family barbecue.
And finally, who got the most votes in the 2003 California recall election for governor that was won by Arnold Schwarzenegger? Was it Hustler magazine publisher Larry Flint, actor Gary Coleman from Different Strokes, or adult movie star Mary Carey?
I'm going to go with Gary Coleman. 'Cause I was,
Ooh. No.
no,
But close, but close.
Close.
that's quite a mix of people there. I don't know.
Larry Flint got the most votes,
Lazza.
followed by, Lazza, followed by Gazza, Gary
Gazza.
Coleman, and then Mazza, Mary Carey.
Love a good Maz.
Yeah.
But this field, it sounds like a hypothetical scenario with the objective being, describe a situation where I'd be relieved to hear the guy from Kindergarten Cop won the election.
Okay, now it's time to step into the pitch ring. Now, it doesn't take much to make the world a better place. I tell myself that every morning when I put on deodorant. But our three pitches are aiming even higher than not stinking up the trend.
Our winner will not only go into our season grand finale with a chance to win huge prizes, but will also take home the coveted prize that proves they are the Australian version of the unicorn, the Unaroo.
This just in, there's been another leadership spill and the Unaroo is now Prime Minister.
Stability at last.
We've selected 3 real startups to pitch their companies to the panel.
They'll be judging the ideas on originality, marketability, scalability, and how easily they can be turned into an inspiring video by Upworthy.
The rules are simple. Rule 1, you have 2 minutes. Rule 2, at 30 seconds, you're going to hear this sound. Rule 3, don't challenge the Prime Minister unless you have the numbers. The panel will have an opportunity to give feedback.
Our first pitcher wants to get more young people interested in voting. From my memory of Student Representative Council, that means promising to get a Coke machine in the common room. Please welcome Alexandra Fuller from Young.
Last year, 3 leaders in youth activism founded Young because we saw that economic inequality was hurting our generation and no one was doing anything about it. Hi, I'm Alex. I grew up in regional Tasmania, and when I was 18, I moved to Melbourne because there simply weren't the work opportunities for young people back home. Many young Australians have similar stories. Things like quality education, affordable housing, and secure employment are moving further out of reach for many young people. Young people live these issues and can shape solutions, but we're being shut out of the conversation. Young exists to build the power of young people to win brave campaigns for a fairer future. There's no other organisation like us. We are independent, led by young people, and campaign across multiple intersecting issues. In a year, we've reached 100,000 young people and started 6 local groups. Now, we're turning our early wins into a national movement for economic justice. This year, we'll kickstart young camps across the country where we'll come together to share skills and launch more local chapters. These chapters will be supported by smart, data-led digital campaigning and support for young media spokespeople to shift the narrative of what it means to be a young person in Australia. To put our plan into action, Young needs $370,000 in seed funding over the next 12 months. We've already secured $42,000 from partner organisations and philanthropists. We have a team ready and willing to put Young's plan into action with your support. Social movements have always been led by young people, from resisting the Vietnam War to the March for Our Lives. We need that passion and energy here and now. With a system increasingly stacked against us, it's time to level the playing field and fight for the fairer future we all want to see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. Natalie, let's start with you. Do you have any questions for Alex about Young?
Thanks for that, Alex. That's amazing to hear, and amazing to hear your passion for getting involved in politics. I guess my question is, can you talk us through how you've gone about engaging young people? You've sort of spoken about the town where you've come from. How are you out there, and where are you sort of directing your
Definitely. The young community sort of grown quite organically. We started as a Facebook group, and then we would, drinks after work in cities and towns across the country. And local groups have sort of sprung up from there who are ready and willing to run campaigns. But we are looking to go beyond, just capital cities and really reach and connect with young people in regional communities as well.
And how are you doing that?
Great question. So one project that we're really passionate to start is these camps. So travelling around the country, bringing together young people in their own communities to talk about the issues that are important to them and provide them with important training in community organising, how to speak to the media, all of those sort of skills that will allow them to start a group and advocate for themselves.
Thank you so much. Damien, what about you? Any questions for Alex with Young?
I'm curious, are you considering working with any partners or any way to sort of scale it to create a larger movement?
Yeah, that's a great question. So currently we're partnering with Environment Victoria to run an Enrol to Vote campaign. So that's one example of how we've identified a gap in the current kind of activist and not-for-profit space and tried to work with others to fill that gap. So yeah, that will definitely be an ongoing focus.
And then, one of the big challenges for young people for generations is to get the people in power to actually listen, which they often don't. Have you landed on anything that you feel, works well that hasn't been found before?
That's a good question. I feel like currently organisations that are advocating for the interests of young people are really siloed and really only service delivery organisations, so focused on providing, direct support to young people who are facing hard times. So we want to, I guess, reinvigorate the youth space by being sort of a more left of centre activist voice. And we intend to work in multiple ways. So enrolling people to vote is an example of bringing people into the political system. But, we may explore, other opportunities like bringing people together for marches and rallies to really elevate our message.
Please join me in thanking Alexandra. Now let's cross back to our correspondent. Dinushi, do you have our spruikers?
I sure do, Ben and Ray. First up, we've got Kevin, who'll be fighting the good fight for Wonder Ray. Then we're going to hear from Julia, who will be spruiking for Super Ben. Now, the two of them will have 10 seconds each to give the party room a JFK-level speech. Kevin, are you ready? Yes. Let's hear it.
Okay, well, Ray stands for free puppies, rainbows on Sunday, and all the laptops you can eat.
Sir, you definitely have my vote for now, but first, let's hear from Julia.
Well, Ben stands for lower taxes, free housing, and everything that Kevin just said as well, because that's the benefit of going second.
I mean, that is certainly enough to swing my vote, but what does the audience have to say? They'll be voting in our Twitter poll at TSU Show. It's pretty tense in the room here, so back to you, our candidates, Ben and Ray.
Thanks, Dinushi. You're watching That Startup Show, and we're just a bunch of entrepreneurs checking out upstart startups like it's nobody's business. Except it is. It's your business. It's our business.
You okay, mate?
I just want my country back.
Please, for the love of God, decolonise it for all of us. Our second picture wants to take you behind the camera of influencers. Just a heads up, they hate that in real life though. You get in the way of the viewfinder and they can't see what they're photographing. Please welcome from Husky, Yelena Fairfax.
So after 12 years working in publishing, so in digital and traditional media, I started to notice that there was a bit of a shift. People were far more interested in what influencers were doing as opposed to celebrities. I like to call it the Nicole Vaughn versus Nicole Kidman effect. Only problem is there wasn't that much information out there about them. You could go to their personal blogs, you could go to their Instagram feeds, but once they put the camera down, you don't really know much about them. And to Husky, I wanted to create a platform where we really delved into their lives. We got to see the real them. We got to find out about their love lives and, everything that you want to know about celebrities. That's what we wanted to deliver about influencers. And we've gone about that. We've interviewed over 260 now. We let you know all about what their real lives are, and also we kind of provide a place where brands can also go and they can find out more about the space. They can use Husky to discover people, or if they want to know how to make a snazzy Instagram feed themselves, anything like that. We're a bit of a one-stop shop when it comes to the influencing scene. And so I just really wanted to come here tonight just to grow the awareness about Husky and let brands know that, if they're overwhelmed by the space, which, let's face it, a lot of startup brands are. It's like you don't know where to start, you don't know who to work with. This is a space, a free resource where you can come, have a little read, have a little learn, and find out all about the influencer world. Thanks for having me.
Natalie, do you have any questions?
Just more of a bit of a clarification. You sort of mentioned you've collected all of these stories, and this came about your interest in influencers themselves, but then you've also pitching it to the brands. So who are you sort of aiming at, or do you have multiple audiences?
I have multiple audiences. So basically influencers come to read about other influencers, their colleagues, their friends, they're really interested in the space. We have your normal readers that are really interested in their space. They want to know what Steph Claire Smith had for breakfast. They want to know what Laura Jade Stone's boyfriend looks like, or, you know, that what he does. So we've got, you know, the people that are interested in the influencers themselves. And then what I've really noticed is I have so many brands that are using Husky as their education, as their tool. So basically, you have brands that they say to me, the first thing they do when they get in the office is to jump on Husky because they're learning about influencers they didn't know. They kind of feel like they're tapping into that world, even if they don't know much about it. They look knowledgeable when their CEO says to them, like, who should we work with? And they go, oh, who did I read on Husky this morning? You know, and then it's like, oh, Elise Cook is doing great things. She's traveling Australia with her boyfriend. She's getting like heaps of followers, and they're like, oh, well done. And they feel good, and, you know, and so I love that we kind of, what I said about being a one-stop shop, we definitely are providing a resource for whole lots of different audiences.
What about you, Damien?
Well, I mean, I was wondering, this is the obvious question as a journalist in a disrupted media space. How do you guys make money? I mean, is this an advertising play, or what's the revenue stream?
So basically, a lot of it is editorial, that what you see on the site, but behind the scenes what I'm doing is I'm working a lot with brands, teaming up with an influencer, but instead of being like an influencer agency, you've got, you know, there's hundreds of those around. The difference with Husky is that we then provide the evergreen content on the site. So, you know, so we team them with an influencer that we know does well. We can see from the engagement on the site that they're going well. So there's even we can prove that beyond just the Instagram space, people are interested in them, because I've got the stats and I'm a bit of a stats crazy person. Love looking at that. So basically what we say, that we work with brands and say, this person will be good for you. They've got the right audience. We can tell they've got an engaged audience. And not only are you going to get that quick exposure, that Instagram exposure, that immediate thing that looks really good in your reports and things, but you get that evergreen content. So, for example, our top piece of content is actually a branded piece of content. We worked with a brand that were working with influencers. We did an interview with them. We featured on Husky, and now it's received over 40,000 views to that article. And, you know, they teamed up with this brand for one post over a year ago, yet I still get hundreds of views to this branded article to this day, which means they continue to be linked to that brand. So that's kind of what makes us a good, I guess, ROI for a brand's looking for that kind of campaign.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Yelena. Could you please join us in thanking Yelena from Husky? Now, let's have a chat between us about tech, democracy and startups. So, Natalie, in Australia, we vote by going into a small cardboard box with an HB pencil in one hand and a democracy sausage in the other. But this is actually how we vote in 2018. We're living in the world of tech. Is this how we should still be voting?
Not at all. Like, the last time I was at school, I was there with a HB pencil, and things have moved on so much. I just think we do so much now on our devices. You know, we can order food, we can book plane tickets, yet when it comes to, you know, every 4 years we have to go down the local school, and so...
But do we trust a government that can't necessarily roll out a census enough in order to make sure that an election electronically will work?
Well, I think, you know, surely... It's sort of one of those,
so.
you would hope so, but yeah, fair enough, the census, and there have been a few epic government fails. Yeah. So yes, perhaps we need to look at who's, you know, running the show first, but it is sort of mind-boggling to think in this day and age that, yeah, we're still doing the old-fashioned pencil and paper and, you know, and then the poor people that have to stay back there counting
all night manually
through when we've got all of this technology. It's just,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I'm sure there is a better way.
So, Damien, what does an ideal 21st century voting system look like? Are there countries out there that are doing it right and steps our government can be learning from them?
Yeah, I don't know if there are countries that are doing it right. I mean, I'm surprised Facebook hasn't already told us all who we're going to vote for anyway. So maybe this is the system. No, but I do think, I mean, one of the huge problems in democracy, right, is this gap between what we can do with the speed with which we can do it on our devices and the way that government works. Like there's this enormous lag in the efficiency of the things that we carry in our pockets and the efficiency of government. And whether it's still in paper or whether it's digital or no matter what it is, government has to figure out some way to close that gap, or else all you're going to do is just see more and more apathy and more people who are, the only voting they do is going to be hitting a like button. And that's basically what we're kind of moving towards.
Yeah.
We were talking about the idea that sometimes rollouts of new technology can be stuffed up, but of course, new technologies can also be susceptible to hacking, for instance. Right. So have we seen examples of this overseas where that has happened, where people have tried to roll out new technologies and democracy has been undermined as a result?
Well, I can think of a country where there have been some challenges to democracy from foreign powers. I think it's called the United States. Yeah, I mean, it's clear that governments have been trying to influence, how people vote for a long time. And, voting, anything that's networked is vulnerable. And so, one of the things you have to figure out is it a closed system or can it be something that's connected to the internet? I mean, it's an open platform that's meant to be open. So it's very hard to somehow secure it. But, it's not just countries that are trying to influence our votes. It's, interest groups and all kinds of other different things too. And so it's not just about the ballot box, right? If there is a ballot box. It's also about what we read and what we consume. And we all need to be savvier, I think, about kind of what we do.
I mean, Natalie pointed out the fact that we go into a cardboard ballot box here in Australia with a pencil isn't necessarily the most convenient thing. And I know that in America, for instance, these issues are compounded by the fact that some voters are actively disenfranchised because of the system of going out on a certain day. Does America especially need to update their system, and what might that look like?
Absolutely. I mean, the idea that the United States voting system requires you to be out of work on a Tuesday, and that's the only time you can vote for a lot of people.
A lot of people can't take work off that day.
Exactly. And, every system that we have is decided by people who have power and have a decision how to structure that system. Structures create and exacerbate power dynamics in any place. And so the United States has created a system where a lot of people have an interest in limiting who gets to vote and in making it difficult. And so, at some point, you have to hope that the pendulum swings to the other side where people say, hey, let's make this as easy as possible and open the doors as wide as we can. I don't know if technology will help or hurt that, but it's definitely something.
Do we turn to blockchain for something like that?
I covered the internet in the .com boom in San Francisco in the early 90s, and I sometimes go back to those early chat rooms and sort of the ideal of what digital technology could bring at that point was like civil conversation, passion, open dialogue and discussion, and I keep wondering when or if we can ever get back to it.
Now, social media. It's a part of democracy now, whether we like it or not, and it's basically unregulated. You've got fake news, you've got echo chambers and direct communication between candidates and the public, which is unprecedented. Should tech companies or governments address this, and will they?
I mean, the problem, right, is that the tech companies have created these black boxes that don't really allow us to understand how they're engineering the way we consume media and the way we consume our cultures. And so government is the only force that can create transparency and that can make companies open up the process. And so at some point, people need to mobilize and request the governments do that. And at some point, hopefully, you'll have leaders that actually understand technology better than the leaders we have now. But again, that may be generations away, unfortunately.
Is that how you feel as well, Natalie?
Yeah, I think accountability is really big when it comes to social media. Whose responsibility that is, governments or the tech companies? I think both of them have a role to play there. And I think something else that could be done is, I guess, more social media literacy training, if you like, because we as journalists, we see something on Twitter, an article being circulated, and we have the tools to work out if that's, we know the signs to look for with fake news. We seek a second source. But I think in the social media world, for the average punter at home, where there is information overload, there could be more done to improve social media literacy so people can more easily recognise that fake news when it pops up on their timeline.
Absolutely.
Natalie, let's stay with you. The world that we live in does have borders. In some cases, are very heavily enforced borders. But some of these companies that exist, I mean, in the tech world, we don't have borders. Those borders are pretty porous. And now some of these companies are effectively global economic powerhouses in their own right. I imagine their GDP exceeds a lot of countries themselves. So what ability do governments and citizens have in ensuring that those companies are made accountable? Do you think that exists, that facility exists?
That is a big question. I'm not quite sure, yeah.
Yeah, where do we start?
That's right.
Do we need to be lobbying the governments to be more accountable? Is this something that we need to do as citizens to say, hey, can you please be paying some attention to this because it's making an impact?
Absolutely. I think it is up to us. I don't think government's going to, you know, pick up the mantle and run with it on this. So I do think it is on us to be demanding that our governments hold these big companies accountable and that we're demanding transparency.
I wonder if sometimes we romanticise technology's role in the democratic project because these are essentially companies that at the end of the day are for-profit companies that are either mining our data for advertising or other things. Is that an uneasy marriage? Like, do we kind of look at technology and its role in advancing democracy with rose-coloured glasses?
I think we have, and we kind of always have, right? You think about the auto industry. They told us we're going to make your cities livable. It's going to be glorious. We're just going to ride around in leisure. And how did that turn out? You know, like history has a tendency to sort of over-romanticize what's new, backed with company money and power to tell you that this is good. And so enforcing accountability for anything new is always a challenge. Whether it's a national issue or an international issue.
I think we want the new thing to be good as well. We want to look at these things and go, this is the thing that's going to save us. This is the thing that's going to make everything better. So, yeah, we are a bit blind to its faults.
And there's something wonderful about that. I mean, new things can't exist if people aren't optimistic about what they can do. And so creativity and innovation is based on our human need for novelty and for newness and for excitement. And so, you know, you just have to figure out how to manage it once it gets beyond that embryonic phase and turns into a Frankenstein.
So managing that Frankenstein, do you think that that's the job of startups now? To disrupt that tech, disrupt those tech superpowers and even empower the local communities as well?
Well, one of the things you see in Silicon Valley, right, is the children of a lot of the people who built some of this stuff don't have access to a lot of the technology that they've been building. And so you do have, I think, a kind of backlash even inside the tech movement. It's basically saying, hey, wait a second, maybe we are the ones that have to take responsibility for this. And, you know, I personally know people who have started things and had second thoughts about what they did and then figured out some way to adjust. And the good news is there's a belief in being able to change things. It's an open system, and the internet will tell you information wants to be free. And so maybe some of the same smart people who built the things that cause problems will also find solutions, you know, if they focus on that and not delivering food, you know, we'll see.
Do either of you worry about the opposite interaction where governments and countries can actually shape tech companies sometimes for the worse? I'm thinking obviously of, say, Google and China. Here's a tech company wanting to go into a country, a tech company that wants to be benevolent in their own way, and yet might have to adhere to the standards of a communist, country that has its own ideas of what free speech should look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a serious problem too. I mean, this is a game of power, right? And certain countries can hold power and hold technology to account. I mean, I'm more concerned about the way that governments use this technology for surveillance, for all kinds of things that limit speech and limit freedom. And so, sometimes you build something, you don't quite know how it's going to be used. And so I'm more concerned about how it might be deployed than I am about companies having to adjust to fit into those systems.
Right. And finally, let's end with you, Natalie. Let's end with a note of optimism as well, because we started talking about the ways that technology and social media can empower people who might be living remotely, for instance, entire communities. What are some kind of concrete ways that you've seen that happen?
Oh gosh, well, as I mentioned, we are seeing a lot of Indigenous people across the country, and so now we can hear voice. Obviously, there are some very remote places that still don't have access to technology, but compared with how, we've been up till now, people can stay on country and be, we can hear their voices here in the capital cities, and that's, amazing.
That's a relatively new thing.
Yeah.
It is, absolutely, and I just love the whole, we are the oldest living culture the oldest living people on the planet, yet using this latest technology to help record those stories. So that's been a real positive thing. And just there are so many ways that the Indigenous community have embraced tech, from rangers who are using it to care for country, for children in classrooms, for people with health problems who can see a specialist in the city. So there have been lots of great ways that technology has helped within the Indigenous community, and that's just, I'm sure it's helping other subsections of the community too. So as I say, I'm thinking that certainly the positives that technology has brought far outweigh the negatives, and really exciting to think how that's going to bring communities together as we get more and more ideas and startups doing their thing.
That gives me hope.
And I can just scroll through my Instagram feed and find amazing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander designers, and they're making jewellery and
art centres
and using culture
Absolutely.
to create businesses from wherever they are.
That's
which is
right.
great.
So it doesn't, traditionally people did have to kind of move away for education or for jobs. Now they can stay strong in culture, strong on country, but still be connected to Sydney, Melbourne, wherever.
Brilliant. Now, thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Damien. We will be back soon with our third pitch, and our panel will decide on the winner. But first, here's Alan Jones, the good one that doesn't drop the N-word, with another tale from the big book of startup fairy tales.
Oh, hello, founders. I didn't see you there. Do you know, I love a story about looking where other people aren't. Actually, I've got a story about that now. Would you like to hear it? It's called Little Red Ride-Sharing Hood. Once upon a time, a young entrepreneur named Red decided to go it alone and raise funds for her new ride-sharing service that only had female drivers because of, creeps. So she packed her pitch deck and the special branded mints that she thought would be a pretty cool leave behind, and set off to talk her cashed-up grandmother into funding it. Unfortunately, on the way, she got lost in the deep, dark woods of Wall Street, a frightening place, full of towering buildings that were no place for a woman, at least according to them. Eventually, she met a big bad wolf of Wall Street, who asked her where she was going. "I'm going to start a ride-sharing service for women," she told him. "How sweet," he condescended. "What nice lips you have." Fortunately, Red recorded the big bad's wolf sexism, and after all, that is 2018. The ensuing #MeToo scandal served to prove to the general public that her ride-sharing app was even more necessary because the wolves were everywhere. Red ended up inheriting from her grandma, who had unexpectedly died of digestion. And while she may not have become a unicorn, her company did become a very successful and inclusive zebra, employing folks of all stripes. And the moral of this story is to VCs everywhere: look for diverse voices, or you'll wind up stuck in a cottage industry, if not a decapitated wolf. The end. Now, little startups, it's time for bed, if that story of rampant sexism doesn't keep you up all night. Good night.
Our third pitcher is working on closing the gap, and I don't mean the chain of US clothing stores. Please welcome Marsha Uphill.
Nanga, Nai Michi Aranyana, Yaya Nanganai Adyamat Nayarta. Hello, I am Aranyana, the firstborn woman of my mother. My country is the Flinders Ranges in South Australia. And I pay my respects tonight to the Wurundjeri people, traditional owners of the land on which I stand. I also pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us tonight or watching. At Aranyana, we aim to empower business and First Nations to collaborate for generational change. We do this through my startup, Campfire, an online diagnostic tool designed to assess a business or a board's cultural respect, cultural intelligence and cultural impact. We take them on a journey from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence, starting with you don't know what you don't know, but when you do know it, we want you to know it so well it becomes a way of life. What we do is we educate by looking at what you currently do, what you'd like to do, and what the gaps are. We connect you with the traditional owners of the land on which your business operates. We inspire you with culturally appropriate programs and opportunities individual to your business. And we empower you with the tools, the training and the strategies in order for you to create your own cultural respect framework in collaboration with First Nations people. My journey is a journey of system failure. At 7 years of age, my mother was forcibly removed from her family, her community and her culture. We know this is the stolen generation. That same system failed me as I grew up in poverty, homelessness, and the racism at school often left me not wanting to attend. I reconnected with culture as a teen, and for the next 25 years spent my time working in bureaucratic systems in government, looking for gaps in what could impact Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So I stand here tonight as a game changer, as a planet shaker, and an Aboriginal woman determined for generational change. For those of you who have a eucalyptus leaf, I invite you now to grab that leaf, crush it in your hand and roll it around, releasing the oils. Cup your hands and breathe. What you hold in your hand is the leaf from a tree that has been here since the beginning of time, perfectly created by our Creator, designed for healing purposes. And tonight I invite you to do some healing for this nation and collaborate with me. Come and sit at my campfire. Let's talk about what we can do together for generational change. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Marsha and Natalie. Let's start with you. Any questions about Campfire?
Firstly, I want to say thank you to Marsha. That was beautiful and so lovely to hear language spoken here tonight. So thank you for sharing that with us. I guess what really intrigued me about your pitch is that you're working with businesses. When we hear about closing the gap, often we think that that's a government policy and a government responsibility. So why is it so important that businesses help in this national effort to close the gap?
Well, I think, and you're right, it has been left to government or corporations. And I think for a long time, certainly the conversations I've had with the business sector is they feel like it's not their conversation to have, or they don't really know how to have that conversation. But 10 years on from closing the gap, we don't see huge steps into reaching what we wanted to do to close that huge disparity between Aboriginal Australia and non-Aboriginal Australia. So for me to work with businesses and empower them to have the appropriate tools and strategies and techniques and connect them with traditional owner groups is a way that I can see that I can influence that gap. And give them an opportunity to actually step into it and go, you know what, we actually can do this. And as a nation, we can take responsibility and work with our traditional owner and our First Nations people.
And has that been received well by the businesses that you've worked with?
Overwhelmingly. Actually, very, very overwhelmingly. I'm on the journey for this startup. It's only 8 months old. I'm still completing my accelerator program, and I already have people banging my door down going, when are you going to finish? Because we need to get started. So, but also on the flip side, having worked in that area for a long time and an Aboriginal person myself, it needs to be something that's, it's long-term change. So the commitment in terms of Campfire is a minimum of a 3-year agreement with myself and a business to make sure that they are having practical things that are going to change, and they're going to be confident in those things changing within a period of time, not overnight.
Damien, what about you? Any questions for Marsha and Campfire?
First of all, I think it's really interesting, and it's great to see businesses sort of find a way for businesses to participate. My question for you is, since it's new, what does success look like to you a few years out from now? What would you consider success?
Well, I have a hashtag massive, obviously. I guess success for me is impacting Victoria, first of all, connecting with my tool is reliant on traditional owner groups being aware of what I do. So there's a two-sided marketplace here. There's not just just the business and customer community. There's the Aboriginal community that needs to be on board. I was raised very much about cultural respect, so I need to let traditional owners know that when I come into their community, into their country, it's all about respect and I won't cross cultural authority. So it's about seeing how it can impact Geelong, Melbourne, Victoria as a whole, then, you know, nationally, globally, in terms of First Nations communities across the globe, but also it can be moulded and shaped for multicultural communities. So it can be adapted to basically work with any community that a business or, say, a government or a local council would like to engage with. So I'm very, very strategic thinker, generational thinker, being an Aboriginal person, so.
Yeah, my other question is, how do you ensure that it's just not cosmetic, that these companies are actually really committed? How do you measure that?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I considered right up front was, how do I keep the integrity of my product? I'm not about tokenism. So in terms of meeting with people and talking to them about what is it you want to do, what do you want to achieve, obviously there's the online diagnostic part, but there's also relationship building, which is a very Aboriginal way of doing business, and that's very important to me. I will not be a person that will support someone because they're tick boxing for a funding agreement. It's very much to me about, how do you want to do this and why do you want to do this? And certainly the people I've spoken to, the heart is in the right place. Fortunately, those people are very few and far between.
Right.
So, thank you.
Would you please thank Marsha? Well, I'm keen to see how many votes I have.
Dinushi, are the results in?
Yes, the results are in, but unfortunately, fake news has ruined it all. So Ben and Ray, you have both been disqualified. Yep. But the good news is it's up to us, the startup people, and we're going to crowdsource our own manifesto. Now, behind me are a few policies to get us started. We've got nationalize the cloud, rename dark matter as Space Jam, accessible PowerPoints in every cafe in Australia. Now, you know, this makes the policies more coherent than anything Clive Palmer's come up with, so I think we're up to a good start. So we do need a little bit more, though, if we want to be really, really running in this race. So luckily for us, we've got the RSA platform, which is a perfect way to get to the heart of what people truly want. So Eyal, can you tell us, how can startups across Australia get their voices heard?
If you have an issue that you want the Startup Party to take to government, go to rsa.org/that startup party, click Get Involved, put up your policy idea or an idea that you care about, vote for the ones you like the most, and we'll take the most popular one and put it to the government.
Fantastic. So jump onto RSA, and that startup party will be picking the best policy idea most voted for at the end of the season and taking it to our leaders, whoever they may be. Back to you, losers.
Okay, that's scandal. What I do with Tide Pods and my naked body is my own thing. It's none of your business.
All right, well, it's time for that part of the show. Our judges are about to announce the winner of the pitch ring.
Well, congratulations to all three of our pitches tonight. You're all wonderful and all would be very deserving, but our winner tonight had us spellbound from the moment she stepped out. A very clear strategic direction and doing some really meaningful work in closing the gap. Congratulations, Marsha.
Thank you.
Well done, Marsha. You are now in the running to compete in our grand final, where you could win some really big prizes.
That's awesome.
And that is all we have time for. Please thank our pitchers, Alexandra, Yelena and Marsha. And our wonderful panel, Natalie Ahmat and Damien Cave.
Next time, we're going to look at the Internet of Things and ghost tech. I can't guarantee I won't spend the whole show shouting about not crossing the streams.
See you then, entrepreneurs.
Okay?
What's next for Husky?
So We're constantly looking at evolution of the publication. So it's at the moment we're quite busy with organising shoots and campaigns, but once that settles down, we do have a few bigger things in the works that I'm kind of keeping my lid on.
Now, being a new startup, it's pretty hard. Is there anything that you do to keep you inspired that you can share with other founders out there?
That's a great question. I have a really great network of colleagues who I'm working on this with, so we keep each other motivated, I suppose. Just rallying people around you that also believe in the vision and can help make it possible.
So congratulations, Marsha, for winning with your mesmerising pitch tonight. What's next?
Wow, I think I'm going to find a place for the Uniroo because that is just amazing. But what's next is to basically get on with doing the job, get on with business.